order. Today, the Judiciary Committee will consider the reality that guns have now become the leading cause of death for children in America. Not automobile accidents, not injuries in the home, not cancer, guns. According to the CDC in 2020, the most recent year's statistics are available. 4,368 American babies, children, and teens died from gunfire. That's 12 kids every day, an increase of nearly 30% over the previous year. America has watched in horror as one mass shooting after another has claimed the lives of innocent children. But it isn't just mass shootings. In 2020, an average of nearly 8 kids were killed in gun homicides every day. We also lost nearly 1,300 kids in gun suicides that year, and nearly 150 died in gun accidents. Guns are killing our kids at a devastating rate. I want to show a video that reflects the grim reality. I want to warn the audience that the video contains scenes that are disturbing.
We're playing, they got a gun, they were playing. My daughter, she's dead, she's dead.
A guy with a pistol or some kind of gun, and he came in and shot my mother and my grandma.
We got shot.
Where? A kid got shot? They shot a kid?
Bang, 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 bang. We were all panicking because we didn't know what was really happening.
I was playing dead, so he won't shoot me.
This right here is the picture of the bullet that entered my head.
I was behind a boy, Nicholas, and when he fell over, I just followed his every movement and I fell over with him, and then I put him on top of me because he was already. I just told myself I need to look like I'm dead.
I was a survivor way before the Parkland massacre. Shootings, gun violence happens to me every day.
Growing up as a young black teen in Chicago, we are surrounded by gun violence. I lost my brother a few years ago.
I looked down and I saw blood coming out of my hip.
Everyone who was injured or hurt was in the 9th grade, me including.
A lot of people either don't know about or forget about the trauma of gun violence. Every day it feels like the shooting is happening again, or happened yesterday, or will happen tomorrow. People affected by everyday gun violence have to walk by the street corner where their best friend, their brother, their mother, their nephew, where they themselves were shot. That trauma, once inflicted, doesn't leave.
Sometimes when I'm laying down, I just hear it and I get scared.
Sometimes at night, I have nightmares too.
I don't want it to happen again.
And you think it's going to happen again?
We don't give the issue the seriousness that it needs, and I just want elected officials to take the issue a lot more seriously than we currently do.
Today marks the 9th hearing this committee has held in the 117th Congress on our nation's epidemic of gun violence, the 9th. No aspect of this crisis is more important than its impact on our children. Protecting our kids has to be our most solemn obligation as lawmakers. What can we do? First, we need to admit that this is a problem with a solution. For too long, gun tragedies have met with inaction in Washington. But when we are talking about the #1 killer of kids in America, we can't just shrug our shoulders and say, well, politics make this impossible. I'm glad there's now a bipartisan deal on a framework for reform that would help save lives and better protect our kids. Congratulations, Senator Blumenthal, for your contribution to this effort. Other members of the committee have as well, but I want to single you out because I know ever since Sandy Hook, you've shown a special interest in this. Senator Booker has been involved as well. This framework doesn't include everything I want, but it's made up of reforms that Americans overwhelmingly support. Proposals such as keeping guns out of the hands of dangerous people, like convicted felons and domestic abusers. When they shoot, kids too often the targets are caught in the crossfire. That's why we need Reforms like better background checks, support for state crisis intervention orders, also known as red flags, and tougher laws to crack down on straw purchasing and gun trafficking. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. Last year, we lost a wonderful young Chicago police officer, Ella French. She was in the Inglewood section of Chicago. I'm sure Mr. Willingham knows that section. She was on duty at night, and unfortunately, at a traffic stop, she was gunned down, and her partner was seriously injured, lost the use of his right eye. It turned out that the gun that was being used to kill her was a straw purchase gun that had been purchased in Indiana by a man who admitted he had no criminal record and purchased it to give it to another man who was a convicted felon who ended up killing Officer French. That is the reality. I attended her memorial service with my wife, and I saw a sea of police uniforms coming to pay their respects to this wonderful young woman. So when we talk about straw purchasing, please don't dismiss it. To many of us, it's very, very important. This framework also recognizes that harms of gun violence go beyond bullet wounds. Gun violence is traumatizing an entire generation of American kids. American kids now fear a shooting could happen in their school any day. And in 27 American schools so far this year, it has. We saw how the mass murder of 19 fourth graders and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, has shattered a community and shaken parents and children from coast to coast. But every shooting, whether it happens at a school in Texas or in a neighborhood in Chicago, leaves ripple effects across the community, particularly for the kids who witness it, who endure the loss of a loved one, who live in constant fear they might be the next victim. Often this trauma ends up fueling the cycle of violence. Decades of neuroscience tell us that when kids witness a shooting, it can harm their developing brains and make it harder for kids to form a healthy relationship, regulate emotions, and resolve conflicts. Helping children cope with traumatic experience is vital to breaking the cycle of violence. That's why I joined with Senator Capito in a bipartisan effort to introduce legislation called the Rise from Trauma Act to deliver services in schools and communities to address trauma. I want to also, at this point, make a mention in the record that 2 weeks ago I was in Chicago, and Lurie Children's Hospital hosted a meeting of young people from the neighborhoods with the most gun violence in Chicago. Susan Gordon Hayes is here this morning. I want to thank her and the hospital for their leadership on this issue. We closed the door, and this senator sat there and looked at these young people and said, "Tell me what I don't know about gun violence in your community." They had plenty to tell me, and a lot of it had to do with their life experiences, much different than our own, and why they are where they are today. The framework we're talking about on guns is a step forward. It's a step forward on trauma and mental health programs as well. It could boost programs that bring kids to a better path. Community violence intervention programs, when properly funded and administered, have shown real success in healing trauma. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. After every horrific shooting, there is a debate over whether one reform or another could have prevented the last shooting. That misses the point. It's too late to prevent the last shooting. We need to act to prevent the next shooting. When it comes to gun violence in kids, we need to treat this like the public health crisis it is. Study the risk, identify precautions and interventions that work, and apply them. We should listen to the doctors and law enforcement leaders whose jobs are there to keep our kids safe. And we should listen to our children when they tell us what they're going through. Today we have a distinguished panel of witnesses, and I look forward to their testimony. Let me turn to my friend and fellow colleague, Senator Grassley of Iowa, for his opening remarks.